Hey everyone, so this will be the last video in the Homework 10 series that we have had. Thanks for sticking it out this far. I know that this homework is extremely long, but hopefully these videos have helped you a little bit in making this homework a little less scary and a little more approachable. So number 5 and 6 are pretty similar. They're both asking you to devise some polynomial time reduction from one big problem to another problem that's supposedly smaller. And so in order to do these reductions, let's just talk about a couple things, just some summarizing from the last few videos. Remember that when we are talking about reductions, we are reducing from a big problem to a little problem. And in these, it's a little bit harder to see that the problem that we're reducing to, which is our little problem, is actually smaller or more simple than our big problem, because they're both, in both number 5 and number 6, both problems are somewhat complicated. But basically, what it may help you to remember is to think about this as not as necessarily a smaller problem or a more simpler problem, but a problem that will help us solve, or because the big problem is just going to be a decision problem, solve or decide the big problem. So it's not really necessarily the case that the problems that we're reducing to are more simple than the big problem here. It's just that the problem that we're reducing to will help us solve or decide the big problem, which was the same as number 2 when we talked about that in that video. Same thing, same idea. In number 2, remember we had ATM as our big problem, the acceptance problem decision, and we had some smaller machine that did something much more simpler. But regardless of whether that machine was simpler or not, ultimately that machine helped us to decide the big problem of the acceptance problem. And so we're doing the same thing here. We're just reducing from a big problem to a problem that will help us decide the big problem. And so number 1 asks you to reduce from the Hamiltonian Cycle problem to the Traveling Salesman problem. Now, I don't think that Dr. Sullivan gave you very much information, at least not in the homework. She might have talked about it in her class notes, and I'm just not sure. I haven't looked at them. But I don't know if she gave you a whole lot of information about the Hamiltonian Cycle problem. But it's very similar to the Traveling Salesman problem. The only difference is that the Hamiltonian Cycle problem does not imply that the graph is complete, whereas the Traveling Salesman problem does imply that the graph is complete. And what do I mean by a graph being complete? So let's say that this is your Hamiltonian cycle graph here. Let's just say this is your graph G. This is not a complete graph. This could be your Hamiltonian cycle problem, but it's not complete. To make it complete, we would have to make sure that all vertices are connected to all other vertices. So this vertex would need to be connected to this one, and this one would need to be connected to that one, and that would make it a complete graph. So Hamiltonian cycle doesn't imply that the graph is complete. But otherwise, besides that, all you want to be able to decide for the Hamiltonian cycle is the actual decision question itself asks you, does the graph contain a cycle that is, some path where you start and end at the same vertex that visits each vertex exactly once. Of course, that doesn't include the vertex that you actually stop and end at. So, here we can see that we obviously do have a cycle that visits each vertex exactly once, and you can start at any of these and basically just go in a square, and that would be your Hamiltonian cycle, right? And so maybe you're asking yourself, wait a minute, how does this differ at all from the traveling salesman problem? Well, let's talk about that. Because it may seem at first like these two problems are exactly the same, but they're not. So the traveling salesman problem, or TSP, it does imply that the graph is complete. The graph must be complete. So, we must have some graph that looks like this, where every vertex is connected to every other vertex. That is one of the requirements for the traveling salesman problems. And we also, instead of just saying, does the graph contain a cycle that visits each vertex exactly once? I mean, that's obvious. If the graph is complete, yes, there is a cycle that visits each vertex exactly once. There has to be. But instead of knowing that, we want to know, does the graph, this is going to sound the same as the Hamiltonian cycle problem for a while, contain a cycle that visits each vertex exactly once and has total, you call it weight or length, it doesn't matter, we'll call it length for here, because I think that'll help you understand the solution when you're ready to get to it, has total length of less than or equal to some number k. So that means that your traveling sales problem, you must also have some number k, which is a non-negative integer, and your paths here must have, your edges here must have weights or lengths to them. So every edge must be given some number associated with it. And they can be the same number. It doesn't have to be like numbering off the edges. And then you have to, see if I go, let me change my color here. Let's say my k equals 6. I'm just picking some number at random to see if I can do it. If I start here and I go here and I go here and I have to go here and then I go here, does that total length, is it less than or equal to 6? Well, let's see. We have 1 plus 1 plus, sorry. I always number the same path, two different things. This one is 2. Plus 2 plus 3. That is not 6, unfortunately, that is 7. So it looks like I'm doing a greedy heuristic here to find out the traveling salesman. And so it looks like this will not contain a path that will get you to every vertex and back to where you started with under 6 or less than or equal to 6 as the length. The least is 7. And so, anyway, that's the traveling salesman problem. Is there some path such that it creates a cycle, it visits each vertex exactly once, and it has total length of less than or equal to some number k. Okay, so those are how those problems are different. And what you want to do is you want to take the traveling salesman problem and use it to help you determine the Hamiltonian cycle problem. Now, this one and number 6 are both going to require some creativity from you. And so in order to spark some creativity, I'm going to push you a little bit in the right direction without actually giving you the entire answer. So let's delete this. And let's talk about what the right direction is here. Okay, so again, the Hamiltonian cycle problem just involves, it just means that you have some graph, G. And you just want to know, is there a cycle that visits each vertex in the graph G exactly once? So let's make a graph that's not connected in any way. And I am going to keep with my 4 vertex graph here just because it's a little bit simpler to work with. It's very easy to make everything connected with, just drawing a box. So I'll make one where there is one and when there's not. So here, here's your Hamiltonian problem. And I hope it's very easy to see from here that you do not have a cycle. There's no way to start at any of these vertices and create a path that goes to all of the other vertices and gets you back to the same one you started at. That's the most important part here, and visits each vertex only one. You could start at this vertex here. We'll call it number 1, 2, 3, and 4. You could start at 1, go to 2, go to 4, go to 3, and I visited each vertex once, but you can't get back to 1 without going back through 4 and 2. And so that means that you would not have visited each vertex exactly once. You would have visited 4 and 2 twice. So there is no Hamiltonian cycle. This, by the way, is the Hamiltonian cycle problem. Okay? And so, it's very obvious, I hope, that this does not contain a Hamiltonian cycle. Now, how can we take this graph and use the traveling salesman, or create this, use this graph to create a traveling salesman problem in such a way that we can answer the Hamiltonian cycle problem? That's all that really number 5 is asking to do. So let's just talk about how we would do that. Okay, to set up the TSP, the traveling salesman problem, obviously we first need to complete the graph. Okay, and so we would just need to draw an edge here, and here, and here. Now, in completing the graph, we need to think about how do we want to set the weights for these edges, be them the ones in blue or the ones in purple, such that we can still tell if, a Hamiltonian cycle exists. So we need to just think about, how do we set the weights? And I'll walk you through this example, and I'll leave it to you to extract the sort of larger idea from there. So when we think about how do we check, or how do we set the weights, remember total length or total weight. This can also be lengths of the paths. They're both the same. Total length must be less than or equal to some number k. All right, and since the Hamiltonian problem doesn't include any number k, we get to pick a number k. So how do we pick the number k? And so what we're trying to do is we are trying to pick a number k and set the lengths or weights of the edges in the graph such that when we have the answer to the TSP problem, we are also given the answer to the Hamiltonian problem. Now that may seem like an impossible task to you right now, but let me sort of push you towards the creativity thing here. So let's just think about how many edges does it take in any graph, in any complete graph, how many edges does it take to create a traveling salesman solution? So let's say we have 3 vertices right here. Okay, how many edges does it take? This is a complete graph, everything's connected, everything else. How many edges does it take to get from one vertex, visit every other vertex once, and return to where you started? Well, if you start here, it takes 1, 2, 3 edges. So 3 vertices, 3 edges to complete TSP. All right, what about 4? again, draw a complete graph. I hope you will start seeing a pattern here. Let's say you start here, you go here, let's say you go here, and then you go here. Well, that took 4. Or if we were down in a box, it'd be right. It would be 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. That would be 4. No matter where you go, if you start at 1, end at the same one, and visit each vertex once, that's going to give you 4 edges that you need to go through. So if you have 4 vertices, you need to go along 4 edges. Okay, what about 5? I'm going to stop after 5 because I think you will see the pattern. Plus, it's very hard to keep making connected graphs with like 6 and more vertices. This one's not too bad. All right, so I hope you agree that this is connected. Every vertex is connected to every other vertex, so this is a complete graph. So how many does it take to get you from, say, here, visit every other graph, and end up back here? Well, if you went just around the outside edges, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you drew a star, like some of us like to do, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, any other path you could possibly want to take. Let's say you did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I hope you see the pattern. If you have 5 vertices on a complete graph and you want to do a traveling salesman, it's going to take you 5 edges. Okay, so now you ask yourself, well, how does that help us at all? Well, since we get to pick K, that helps us quite a bit, actually. So consider this. Delete some of this here and make some more space for us. Let's delete that. Okay, so consider this. We know that this doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle because there are only 3 vertices here that form a path from 1, 2 to 4 to 3. If we had a 4th one somehow, then there would be a Hamiltonian path. If we had a 4th one right here, or you know, we could make the 4 this one, these 2, or something like that. If we had some 4th path, then we could create the Hamiltonian cycle. You know, if you have 4 vertices, you need 4 edges. I just proved that to you. If you have 5 vertices, you need 5 edges, and so on and so forth. The only difference between the Hamiltonian cycle needing, you know, if you have 4 vertices, you need 4 edges, or you can sort of generalize that to, you know, if you have n vertices, which is generally the number of vertices we have, you need n edges to have a Hamiltonian cycle. Same for TSP. If you have n vertices, you need n edges to complete your traveling salesman. Now let's talk about the greedy heuristic I was just talking about for solving the traveling salesman, and that will sort of help you to figure out what you need to do. So let's say we have this complete graph here. I like to use 4. It's a good number. Okay, and let me see if I can label these correctly. I always want to label the line in the middle the same thing twice. All right, so let's just say 1, 2, 3. We'll have this be 1, this one be 2, and this one right here will be 3. Okay, and again, it doesn't really matter what you labeled them, you know, when you're just doing the traveling salesman. It will matter when we start reducing the Hamiltonian from the Hamiltonian cycle to the traveling salesman. But for right now, let's just talk about the what's called the greedy heuristic that solves the traveling salesman problem. What you do is you start at some vertex. You can pick any vertex you want. Let's pick this one. And you look at all of the edges that you have available, and you just want to pick the edge with the least weight or the least length. So it's this edge. Let me do this in a different color so you can maybe see it better. Okay, so if we start here, the one of the least weight from there is this one. So we go here and we do the same thing when we get here. So we look at all three of these. We can't go back here. So we're really just looking at the two of these, and we see that this one has the smallest weight. So we go here, and then we look at these. These have the same weight, but if we took this one, we would be going back to where we started without actually going here. So we need to go here. And then obviously we just take that path to get back here. And so we see that our smallest k for this particular traveling salesman problem is going to be 1 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2, which is going to be 7. Now that's if the edges were given those particular weights, which I chose at random. All right, now let's think about this. Let me delete this graph. Let me delete all this. Let's talk about the same. Let me get my pencil back. Let's talk about the same graph. Okay, this graph. But all of the edges have weight 1. All right, what would be your smallest k? I hope you can answer that without even looking at the path that you would want to take. Because remember, if you have n vertices, you need n edges, right? So if each edge is weighted 1, and you know that you need at least n of them, and you have, so we have n equals 4 here. We have 4 vertices, and we know that each edge is equal to 1, and we need at least 4 of them, right? Then we know that our k is going to equal 4, right? That's the minimum k that we need to get around basically to create a Hamiltonian cycle or a traveling salesman solution. Start here, go around, visit each one once, end up where you started from, and you're going to get 4. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be 4. So you may still be asking me, okay, but what can I do with that information? Well, let's look at how we can use that information. So let's say that we have this graph right here that we drew earlier. We know that our k needs to be at least 4 because, you know, if you have your vertex or your n number of vertices, your k needs to be at least that number, regardless of what things are weighted. You know, that's assuming everything's weighted 1, you need at least some number n of length or k in order to get around the graph. So let's see here. Let me see if I can find my colors again. All right, so let's say that we labeled the edges that are in the original graph. Remember, our blue is our original graph. Let's say we labeled the blue edges as just 1, and then we labeled the purple edges as 2. Remember, the purple edges are the edges that we added in after we were given this graph. So we were given this original blue graph. We're asked, does it have a Hamiltonian cycle? We knew the answer was no, but then we wanted to reduce that to the traveling salesman problem. So what we had to do first was complete the graph. So any vertices that were not connected, we have to connect. And then we talked about how do we set the lengths or the weights of these edges. Well, what we decided to do was set all the ones that were in the original graph to 1 and all the ones that we added into 2. Why did I do that, you ask? Because look right here. So this k, what did we just decide? Our minimum k for the traveling salesman problem must equal n, or in this case, if n equals 4, let's say 4, then your k should also equal 4. And the traveling salesman problem asks, is there a path that visits each one of these vertices exactly once, stops where you started, and has a total length or a total weight of less than or equal to 4? So let's just ask that question about this path now that we have set some weights to it. So let's, again, you can start anywhere you want. Let me choose a new color. Choose pink. Let's start randomly at, let's say, number 4. We do the greedy heuristic here. So we'll go, we can pick either of these at random. We'll just go up because it doesn't matter. We'll do the greedy heuristic again. This one's the cheapest. So we'll go there. The only place we have left to go is down to number 3, because if we go back to number 2 or we go to number 4, then we will either have left out number 3 or we will have not visited all of the vertices. So we have to go to 3 now, and then we have to go back to 4. All right, so just sort of a random thing that we did. Started at 1 randomly and just did a greedy heuristic around the graph. And what is our ultimate k that we have here? And remember, we're trying to get the total, sorry, this is not k, this is our total length or weight, whichever one you want to call it. And we're trying to get it, we want it to be less than or equal to 4, we decided. Our total length is going to be, we started at 4, we have 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1. And that, unfortunately, equals 5. And if you weigh the edges like this, where all of the original edges were 1 and all of the edges that you add in were 2, for this particular graph, you are never going to get a Hamiltonian cycle or a solution to the traveling salesman problem that gives you a k, or a total length, of less than or equal to 4. So I hope that sort of helps you get started in the right direction. All you want to do is to reduce from the Hamiltonian cycle problem to the traveling salesman problem, again, is first complete the graph, decide how you set the lengths of the edges in the complete graph, and then decide how you're going to pick k. And again, remember, you generally want your k to equal n, where n is the number of vertices in the graph. So once you pick your k and you've set all your lengths, then you just run through and see, is there a cycle in the graph that visits each vertex exactly once, starts and stops at the same vertex, and has a total length or weight of less than or equal to your k. Once you have that answer, you will have the answer to if there is a Hamiltonian cycle solution or not. So I hope that helps you with number 5. And basically all you want to do is you want to have, same as number 4, you want to have your algorithm where you give your input and output. So for this one, your input is just going to be the original graph. And by original, I mean the one that you were trying to find the Hamiltonian cycle for. So it'd be this one in blue. Your original graph G. And that's just going to be some list of vertices and some list of edges. You can say it's represented as an adjacency matrix, or however you want to say it's represented. Your output is going to be 2 things. It will be the graph corresponding to the traveling salesman graph. And I will point out that that is not the, let me write this down and I'll tell you what I mean here. Graph corresponding to TSP. And basically that is, it's not the graph with just the ultimate solution on it, it's the whole graph, which means the vertices, all of the completed edges, and their weights. okay? So you're going to output that graph and you're going to output your K. And basically what you have done with this input and this output is you have turned this into just a traveling salesman problem where, you know, you could put this into some machine that solves a traveling salesman problem. The machine would take in a completed graph, which is this one right here, and it would take in a K, and it would say, yes, there is a cycle that has total length less than or equal to K, or no, there's not. But what you have ultimately done is you've taken this Hamiltonian cycle problem right here, and you have edited it a little bit such that you could use your output and a machine that decides the traveling salesman problem and get your answer, your ultimate answer to the Hamiltonian cycle problem. I hope that makes sense. If you are lost or if you feel like I have no idea, you know, what I'm supposed to do as far as being creative, rewind a little bit and think about it. And I'm going to move on to number 6, which is the last one in homework, thankfully. All right, so number 6 asks you to reduce, you want to reduce from your vertex cover problem to your dominating set problem. And you looked at dominating set some in number 4, and so you should be fairly familiar with that, although I will review it a little bit here. You may not know exactly what vertex cover means. They're kind of the same problem, again, same as Hamiltonian cycle and traveling salesman that we just talked about, but they're not exactly the same problem. So vertex cover is this problem. Say you're given some graph G, and it doesn't have to be complete. It can be anything you want it to be. I'm just going to create some random graph. Let's say it looks like that. The vertex cover problem wants you to, it basically asks you to cover the edges, which sounds kind of strange, right? But so it wants you to pick some vertices in such a way that every edge is covered. Every edge is adjacent to one of the vertices in the subset of vertices that you pick. So for this particular graph, again, I just kind of picked this at random, and it may not be the best graph ever to show vertex cover on, but you know, basically the greedy heuristic for the vertex cover problem works like this. You want to start by picking the vertex that has the most number of edges. So we would start with this one, and so we would, you know, mark off this edge and this edge and this edge. Those are all covered, and then, you know, we could go here, and that would cover this edge and this edge, and then we would just need to pick one of these, and it doesn't matter which one we pick, and that would be that would cover that edge. And so your vertex cover problem is basically just asking, is there some subset, and this is the decision version of the problem, is there some subset of the vertices in graph G such that the subset size is less than or equal to some number K, and every edge in G is adjacent to a vertex in the subset. So here, our minimum size here is K. So if K were, our minimum size is 3. So if K were equal to 3, then the answer to this vertex cover problem would be yes, there is a subset of size 3 that is such that every edge is adjacent to one of the vertices in that subset. Here's a subset, this one, and this one. If our k was like 2, for example, that's a question mark, not a 2. If our k was 2, the answer would be no. There's no set of 2 vertices in this graph that will cover every edge. You know, we could, for example, not have covered this vertex, in which case this edge would not have been covered either if we just had these 2, or if we had that one, if we had this vertex, or maybe we didn't cover this vertex, in which case, you know, this edge would not be covered, and so on and so forth. So we see that the minimum number there is 3. So that's the vertex cover decision problem. And by the way, that is a question. And then the dominating set decision problem is kind of the same thing. I don't even want to erase all of that. Let me just delete this. Actually, I'm going to erase it all. I'll just redraw the graph here. So let's redraw the graph. It looked, oops, get my pencil back. The graph looks something like this. It's a vertex. Our dominating set problem is kind of the same, but not exactly. And that asks, is there some vertex, I'm sorry, not vertex, some subset of less than or equal to size k such that every vertex, this is, by the way, a subset of vertices, such that every vertex in G is either adjacent to or it's a member of, or is a member of an element of the subset of vertices. So that's kind of the same problem. If you did that on this graph, again, you would, you know, your greedy heuristic would say this one, and then you could do actually this one, and that would cover it. So, you know, here you have this one's adjacent to, we'll call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So number 1 is adjacent to 2, number 2 is number 2, number 3 is adjacent to 2, 4 is adjacent to 2, 5 is adjacent to 6, and 6 is number 6. So you can see it's kind of the same problem, but it's not exactly, because here our minimum k would only be 2, whereas in the graph before it was minimum k was 3. And so we need to determine the vertex cover problem by reducing it to the dominating set problem. So, you know, obviously we can't just say, we'll just feed this graph into the dominating set problem, because what if our k was equal to 2? 2. Then we just saw the dominating set problem would say yes, but the vertex cover problem, which we determined needed to include this one and one of these two, because you have to cover this edge right here. So our vertex cover problem would say no, even though our dominating set problem said yes. So, you know, you have to be a little bit careful here. You can't just say, oh, we'll just feed this graph into the dominating set, and if it says yes, then the vertex cover must also say yes, because here's a one particular counterexample where if you feed it into a dominating set machine, the dominating set machine with k equals 2 will say yes, but the vertex cover machine with k equals 2 will say no. So we need to change our graph a little bit. And this is where you have to be, again, a little bit creative. So let's think about how we need to change our graph. So let's delete that. We'll one more time redraw this graph. And I'm just going to, again, give you a push in the right direction and see if you can sort of take it from there. So this was our graph. Okay, now we know that for this graph, we just determined that our k for the vertex cover must be at least 3, but our k for the dominating set problem can be only 2. And so what we need to do is make the dominating set in such a way that it must be at least 3 as well. We need to change this graph some. And obviously, if you want to increase the dominating set number, you need to increase the number of edges and possibly vertices in the graph. You can't take things away and increase the dominating set problem. That doesn't really make any sense. So let's increase it. So let's just say, for example, that for every pair of connected vertices, we draw a third vertex and we make a triangle. Okay, so there's that. These two are connected here, so I'm going to make a triangle. These two are connected here, so I'm going to make a triangle. These two are connected, so I'm going to make a triangle. These two are connected, so I'm going to make a triangle. And these two are connected, so I'm going to make a triangle. Now you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have really screwed up this graph. It's looking extremely complicated and I have no idea how I'm going to work with this at all. Well, let's just talk about the greedy heuristic for our dominating set. So basically what you want to do is you want to find the vertices that are adjacent to the most number of vertices. And the way to do that is to find the vertices, same as the greedy heuristic for the vertex cover problem, find the vertices that have the most number of edges leading out of them. So let's see, this one has 4, this one has 4. I'm just going to label all of these. Obviously, all of these purple ones only have 2, so they don't really matter so much. This one has 4, this one has 4, this one has, oh my goodness, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one has 3, and all of the purple ones have 2. So let's double check and make sure that's right. This one has 1, 2. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one has 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're just going to do a greedy heuristic. I'll change my color once again. Right, so obviously the first one we're going to pick is this one right here. Okay. And since we're doing dominating set, we're only worried about the vertices that are adjacent to the vertex we just picked. So you can no longer have to worry about any of these vertices because they're all adjacent. And I only drew 1 line through them because I'm drawing 2 lines through the ones that we actually picked. So now let's pick another one. So we've got our 6. We have 2 left that are not. Remember, these purple ones are all 2. So we've got 2 4s left. It doesn't matter which one we pick here. So let's just pick this one. And if you are not convinced that that this greedy heuristic works, or if you wanted to choose this 4 instead and see how it works, by all means do that. Pause the video and try doing this one instead and seeing what you get. But you'll find that it does not matter. You'll find that with this greedy heuristic, this is what you're going to get. So anyway, we picked this 4, and so we can mark off this one, and mark off this one, and we can mark off that one, because those are all connected. But guess what? That leaves us with 1 more that we have not covered in any way in our dominating set. And so we must pick at least 1 more. You could pick any of the ones that are connected to this. You could pick this 4, or this one in particular. It doesn't matter. but you're going to have to pick at least one more. And so by doing this, by creating a triangle for every one of the edges that connected two vertices here, and that's really all we did, was we just created triangles everywhere, you have increased your K for your dominating set. And guess what the new K is? Luckily for us, it is the same as the K for our vertex cover. Now, you may think, oh my God, that was really lucky of her to be able to do that. No, there's some method to my madness here. It's not just I want to make this weird, silly looking picture. You know, there's a method to it. So try it out on your own and see what it is that you have. So ask yourself, what do I have to do to the graph that you're given, to the graph I'm given for the vertex cover decision problem, for vertex cover, to make K, the K, so this is what you're primarily interested in, for BC equal to the K for your dominating set problem. So once you have changed that graph so that these two Ks are equal, then you can feed that new graph into a machine that solves the dominating set problem, and that solution will also be the solution to your vertex cover problem. Remember that given our original blue graph, we chose these three vertices to cover all of our vertexes, or to cover all of our edges, rather. And remember, see, these are all covered. They're all adjacent to vertices that we picked originally. So anyway, once you have figured that out, then you just want to write an algorithm. And I'll give you your input and output here. So let me delete all of this. All right. So your input will be some graph G. And again, that's always, a list of vertices, a list of edges. It can be an n by n, adjacency matrix, etc. Anyway, you're given some list or some graph G, and you need input of some number K. And you're trying to solve the vertex cover problem, and you want to do that by sending a new graph to the dominating set problem, and your answer to the dominating set problem will give you your answer to the vertex cover. Remember, these are just decision problems, and so it'll either say yes or no. Yes, there is some set of vertices that's less than or equal to size K that covers all of the edges for your vertex cover, or for your dominating set, yes or no, there is or is not some set of vertices of size less than or equal to K that such that every vertex in G is adjacent to or is one of the subset of vertices in your new graph or in your subset. And so your input will be G and B. Your output, you're going to have to change the graph, remember, will be your new graph. And you can call it whatever you want. We can call it, G1, for example. This is a 1, not a comma. G1 that you want to feed into a machine that decides the dominating set problem. And I've shown you how to do that. It's up to you to sort of consider what I've shown you and make an algorithm from there. And you're going to feed this new graph into that machine, and you're also going to feed K into it. But K is your input, and it's also going to be it's also your input to your dominating set machine. You don't actually need to write machines that solve the vertex cover problem or the dominating set problem. You just need to write a machine that, let me write this down for you. Let me delete all this. Again, your goal is simply to write the pseudocode for a machine that changes the graph in such a way so it changes the graph so that if you feed the new graph to a machine, I know this is getting kind of complicated, to a machine that decides your little problem, it will also give you the answer to your big problem. And this goes for both number 5 and number 6. So let me write this in a new color. So again, this is for number 5 and for number 6. And I'm trying to color coordinate a little bit here, so let me write your ultimate problems up here. Remember, number 5. Number 5, your big problem was the Hamiltonian cycle. Hamiltonian cycle problem. And your little problem was your traveling salesman problem. And for number 6, your big problem was your vertex cover problem. Remember, your vertex cover is this subset of vertices such that all of the edges are adjacent to some vertex in the subset. And your little problem was your dominating set problem. Dominating set. Remember, dominating set problem is a subset of vertices such that all the other vertices in the original graph are adjacent to one of the vertices in the subset. So this goes for both number 5 and number 6. That's what we're looking for. And then we're looking for the runtime analysis for those machines. And you want to make sure they're in polynomial time. And remember that I talked to you about this in an earlier video, but you may have missed it or you may not remember. Remember that polynomial time is just, we usually talk about it with n. So n is your number of vertices in these graphs. It's some power of n. So n, let me say O of n here. O of n squared, O of n cubed, etc. It's just some power of n. So you want to make sure that your pseudocode for the machines that does this for number 5 and number 6 just runs in some polynomial time of n. Remember, n is the number of vertices in each graph. All right, so I hope that helps you with number 5 and number 6. If you have any questions, as always, please come see me during office hours. I'm going to have office hours this week on Wednesday at 3:45, and they will run until either I need to go, which I'm not sure when that will be, or until people are out of questions to ask me. So good luck on homework 10. I hope that you've started early, and I hope you do well.